If an avoidant truly loves you, the first thing you will not feel is comfort. You will feel tension. Not because the connection is weak, but because it is strong enough to bring up emotions they have spent years trying to hide. You may feel closeness, calm moments, and a deep pull toward each other. Then, just when it starts to feel stable, they pull back. They go quiet. They become distant and harder to understand. Many people think this means the connection is ending, but in reality, this is often where the real pattern begins. With an avoidant, love does not move in a straight line. It comes in waves. They come close, then step back. They feel warm, then suddenly cold. Open one moment, distant the next. If you do not understand this pattern, you will think it is rejection when it is actually fear. You will think the bond is breaking when it is actually being tested. A strong emotional pull usually shows up early. Curious. Conversations feel deeper than expected. Time together feels different from anything you have known before. Even the avoidant feels it, though they rarely say it directly. They may hide it through silence, jokes, or mixed signals, but inside they know this connection is not ordinary. It makes them feel seen, safe, and exposed at the same time. That is where their fear begins. Not always fear of you, but fear of what closeness brings up inside them. Fear of depending on someone, fear of losing control, fear of getting hurt if they get too attached. So when things start to matter, they begin to pull away. Their replies slow down, their energy changes, their presence becomes inconsistent. This often feels personal, but it is not always about your value. Sometimes the feeling became too real for them to handle at once. Still, most people react with panic. They chase, over-explain, ask for clarity, and try harder to fix the distance. But with an avoidant, more pressure usually creates more withdrawal. The more you chase, the more they step back. The shift happens when you stop reacting from fear. Instead of chasing, you stay steady. You do not let silence destroy your peace. You do not turn distance into a measure of your worth. You remain calm and grounded. This changes the dynamic because now they experience closeness without feeling trapped by it. Then something important happens. They leave, but they come back. Not once, but repeatedly. And each return carries meaning. What matters is not just that they return, but what changes when they do. In healthy growth, the silence becomes shorter, the communication becomes more honest, and the warmth becomes a little more stable. They may still struggle, but they do not disappear in the same way. Progress with an avoidant is usually small and slow. A softer tone, a quicker reply, a moment of honesty, or a small effort to stay present all matter. If nothing changes over time and the same pain repeats without growth, then the cycle is just repeating itself. But if each return brings even small signs of openness, then the connection is evolving. Over time, they start learning that closeness does not always mean loss of freedom. They begin to see that being near someone does not have to feel like being trapped. This learning does not come from pressure. It comes from experience. They pull away and nothing breaks. They return and they are met with calm instead of chaos. At the same time, you also change. You stop making your peace depend on their behavior. You stop losing yourself in their distance. You still care, but you no longer abandon yourself to hold the connection together. You become more grounded, less reactive, and more aware of your own emotional balance. This shift is important because an avoidant cannot stay close to someone who loses themselves in the process. When you stay centered, the connection feels lighter and safer. It becomes less about fear and more about choice. A lasting bond cannot be built if one person is always chasing and the other is always running. Real change begins when both take responsibility in their own way. The avoidant becomes more aware of their patterns, and you become more aware of your emotional limits. You learn to tell the difference between fear and intuition, between real rejection and temporary distance. In the end, what matters most is not perfection in behavior, but growth in awareness. Some connections fade because the pattern never changes. Others grow slowly because both people begin to meet in the middle, learning how to stay connected without fear taking over everything. You stay caring, but you stop becoming controlling. That balance is where real change actually begins. It may not look dramatic at first, but it is emotionally mature. And mature love is often quieter than fantasy, even though it is far more stable than anything fantasy can offer. If this is resonating with you, stay with it, because the next shift is where you can finally see whether this bond is just repeating pain or slowly becoming something that can actually hold. At some point, a turning point arrives, but not in the way people expect. There is no big moment or sudden clarity. It is subtle. You just notice they are not pulling away as far as before. The silence that once lasted days now becomes shorter. The emotional distance that once felt like a wall now has small openings. They begin to open up without being pushed. They reach out without needing a perfect reason. Slowly, they start leaning into closeness instead of only staying at a safe distance. That difference matters. Tolerating closeness means they stay because the feeling is strong. Choosing closeness means they are starting to trust the bond enough to remain present in it. That is where things begin to shift, even if everything is still imperfect. It will not feel fully stable yet, but it will not feel the same either. You stop feeling like you are carrying everything alone. The effort starts to move both ways. You can sense intention where there was confusion before. Their return is no longer only about missing you, but about beginning to understand the connection itself. And in that realization, something becomes clear. What lasted did not survive because it was effortless. It survived because both people changed enough to handle it differently. Some relationships are not meant to stay the same as they began. They are meant to reshape the people inside them. When that change is real, it shows in behavior, not words. It shows in steadiness, emotional responsibility, and the ability to stay present even when things feel uncomfortable. So instead of focusing only on the cycle of leaving and returning, the real question is, what is changing inside that cycle? Are they becoming more open over time or just repeating distance? Are their returns bringing more clarity or more confusion? Are they starting to communicate before shutting down, or are you still carrying the emotional weight alone? And just as important, you need to look at yourself too. Are you becoming more grounded and secure or more anxious and drained? Because the same pattern can either be growth or damage depending on what it creates in both people. If there is real movement toward honesty, communication, and emotional responsibility, something meaningful may be developing. But if it is only exhausting you and shrinking your sense of self, then the lesson may not be to wait longer. It may be to step back. Intensity alone is never a reliable measure. Feeling deeply is not the same as building something stable. Chemistry is not the same as security. What matters is where the pattern is heading. Another truth is this: an avoidant coming back does not automatically mean healing. Fear may still exist. Distance may still happen. But the difference is how those moments are handled. When growth is real, setbacks do not erase progress. There is more communication, less silence used as punishment, and less treating closeness as a threat. At the same time, your response changes too. You become less reactive, you recover faster, you hold boundaries more clearly, you stop turning every pause into panic, you stay connected to yourself while still caring. That is emotional maturity in real life. Not perfection, but two people slowly learning not to let fear control everything. And this only happens when both are willing to grow instead of repeating the same patterns. So pay attention. When fear shows up, does the connection collapse every time, or do both people learn to move through it differently? There is also a line between patience and self-abandonment. Being patient does not mean accepting inconsistency or lowering your standards. Healthy patience still requires honesty, respect, and boundaries. It understands that time alone does not create change without effort. Many people lose themselves here by confusing understanding someone's fear with tolerating endless instability. But if something real is developing, there will be signs. More openness, more accountability, and more consistency. Slow progress still moves forward. Stagnation does not. These connections also reveal deeper emotional patterns. The avoidant is pushed toward intimacy instead of escape, and you are pushed to face your need for certainty and reassurance. That is why the bond feels so intense. It exposes unhealed parts in both people. But transformation alone is not enough reason to stay forever. Growth only matters if it leads to something healthier. The real value is whether the connection creates more emotional safety, honesty, and mutual responsibility. If both people are growing, the bond becomes stronger over time. If only one is growing while the other avoids responsibility, then it may still be a lesson, even if not a lifelong story. When things are truly improving, the emotional tone changes. It becomes less chaotic, less confusing, less like something you are constantly trying to fix. There is still depth and attraction, but more calm underneath. You stop decoding silence. They stop seeing closeness as danger. There is more trust, more ease, and more stability. It starts to feel less like survival and more like choice. At that point, both people choose differently. They choose presence. You choose boundaries. They choose honesty. You choose self-respect. And through those choices, something stronger forms, not because it was easy, but because it learned how to survive difficulty without breaking. So the real question is not how intense it feels, but whether it is creating growth in both of you. Because when it is meant to last, it does not just repeat cycles, it slowly changes them. In the end, what makes it real is not confusion, distance, or longing. It is evolution. It is two people learning, step by step, how to meet halfway instead of letting fear control the entire story. In the end, the real truth is not found in how intense the connection feels, but in what it becomes over time. An avoidant bond only has meaning if it moves toward growth, instead of repeating the same cycle of distance and return. Real love in this dynamic is not about chasing or fixing someone, but about whether both people are slowly becoming more honest, more stable, and more emotionally aware. If the connection is real, fear will still appear, but it will no longer control everything. There will be more clarity, more consistency, and more mutual effort with time. And if there is no real change, only confusion and emotional exhaustion, then the lesson may not be to hold on, but to choose yourself. Because lasting love is not built on intensity or uncertainty. It is built when both people learn how to stay present, even when fear tries to pull them apart.